I have just finished playing Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, so here is my off-the-cuff review. Uh, Incredible. If you are a fan of Final Fantasy VI, I think you'll love this remaster. If you've never played Final Fantasy VI, this is the best time to play it and the best way to play it. Now, I know this game has a lot of nostalgia value for a lot of fans, and some people prefer the original sound effects, the original music, the original graphics, etc. And in some places, I prefer the original Super NES versions too. And if you do prefer them, I'm not touching that because what resonates with you with a video game is going to be different from what resonates with me and what resonates with someone else. So if you personally like aspects of the Super NES version better or just like the Super NES version better overall, that's perfectly valid. But in my opinion, Pixel Remaster takes what was already a great game and makes it even better. It is not a perfect port, and it's not a perfect game, and the original Final Fantasy VI wasn't a perfect game, but it's still excellent. I'll start with the strengths. The graphics are one great. Uh, some assets have definitely been reused from past ports. Most of it seems to come from the Super NES port, and for the most part, I couldn't tell if there was anything used from the Game Boy Advance version. The major difference, of course, is the brightness level. Game Boy Advance graphics were way brighter, but the color scheme overall seems much closer to the Super NES version. Maybe a bit brighter. It's hard. In some cases, it's hard to tell. The only place where the graphics really stood out glaring is the world map, which is way too bright. But everything else is closer to the Super NES palettes. The sprites for characters, some have said they're a little too bright and desaturated. I kind of agree. I've seen some modders recoloring the Pixel Remaster sprites using the color palettes of the Super NES sprites, and they do look better. But the new sprites don't look bad. The new sprites still look great. They look way closer to how the characters should look from their concept arts and their appearances and other spin-offs, and they just look great. And the spell and attack animations look incredible. Uh, that like so many a times when casting new attack, new spells, or getting abilities used on me, I was like, whoa, and like they just look great. There's still like Pixel Remaster, other ports have reused a lot of attack graphics between them, and I'm not sure if how many have been reused for this one, but there are definitely a lot of new ones, and they keep to the original appearance of Final Fantasy VI, but just look better. Like the original fire graphics, Fire 2 had the pillar of fire rising up in front of the enemy and washing over them, and Firaga had the huge fireball from above hitting enemies and exploding. Pixel Remaster uses the same animations, they're just way higher quality. And in some cases, the animations are different, and a good different. A good example is the Quake spell. The original game, this maw just opened up and swallowed you. In this game, it's like the ground falls away and consumes you. One I remember was really cool was diffractive laser or diffuser. You know, in the original game, 6 orbs appear around the screen and some lights bounce off around them. In this game, clusters of orbs appear around the party and multiple lasers bounce between them, and it looks more visually impressive. That's really what it comes down to. Attacks and spells look much more visually impressive and way cooler. And the new graphic work that they've done on the field also is excellent. Where they needed to go hard, they went hard. And there's so many little touches, like in Nosh, some of the barrels are frosted over with ice, some of the vents on the ground are broken. In Zozo, the walls have graffiti, and there's this eerie purple lighting coming through the walls. And some of the windows are cracked. In Jador, Ozo's house, I'm not sure. I didn't notice if it was in the world of balance, but in the world of ruin, at least, when the gallery is possessed or haunted, whatever you want to call it now, by Chadanook, the windows are glowing this eerie purple, and you can see shadows moving in the windows. It looks really creepy, really cool. Uh, And just overall, the graphics look great in terms of the field. The interiors, like building interiors and dungeons, they mostly are copied from the Super NES, and again maybe adjustments to the palette. There have been some edits made to make areas easier to navigate. The Magitech Research Facility, there's arrows on the ground to tell you where cranes are. The entrances to pipes now have black and yellow, like almost like caution stripes on their edges, which is fine with me because it just makes those areas a bit more colorful and easier to navigate. Because some areas of Final Fantasy VI are hard to navigate, and if you don't want to just rely on the minimap all the time, just having little visual indicators like that is nice for more casual players. Only area I feel that the graphics for the field really fell short a little bit. Well, not really fell short, but they were a little lacking. For some reason, they redid the entrances to various caves, both exterior and interior entrances, and they look a little out of place. They're like big yellow cobblestones, which they don't quite blend in well, but that's very, very minor, and it doesn't really bother me. Just overall, for NPCs, for attacks and graphics, for the field, graphics look great. They're just as good or superior to the Super NES version. Sound. Some of the sound design is not as great as the Super NES. I think that's just because the limitations of the engine. Maybe some sounds come off a little harsher, and there were times when I'm like, the sound doesn't have the impact it did in the Super NES version. But overall, the sound is still great. A lot of recognizable sound effects are still recognizable as being associated with particular attacks and all that. They just sound higher quality now. The music, should go without saying, is top notch. Final Fantasy VI has one of the best soundtracks of all the franchise, and they knocked it out of the park. All, pardon me. All the music is top notch. There are some aspects, to be nitpicky. Like I've seen people say, the Fierce Battle, the Ultima Weapon, and the Warring Triad battle theme was sounded better for the Super NES version. And I'm not a music expert, so I can't put my finger on how, but there was a quality of the Super NES version that gave it impact that Pixel Remaster is not as great at. So, in some ways, the music is not as great, but overall, the music is phenomenal. I can't think of a track in the game that sounded bad. Again, at least they sound as good as the Super NES version or better. I can't think of a track in the game that stuck out to me as not sounding good, or it didn't fit the character and the mood that the original track was going for. It was just great. Gameplay. Seems mostly unaltered from the original Final Fantasy VI. I know they in some ways they made other pixel remasters easier. Didn't feel like they did that here. If anything, it felt like they might have nerfed a couple things. Edgar's drill and attacks with the Ultima weapon felt weaker. I don't know if that's just me misremembering and my characters had poor stats, or if it's a glitch, or if they did actually make them have lower power, but they did nerf them a little bit. For the most part, though, the gameplay is identical. There's a couple differences that I'm not sure if they're glitches or if they were meant to occur. For instance, the spell Sap, the Sap damage can occur even during attack animations. Sometimes character turns don't seem to go in the order they should, and it seems to be because maybe commands still have charge time and it's just not apparent, or the enemy got their turn while I was picking in the menu, and I'm just thought it's not immediately obvious to me that they got their turn then. But overall, the gameplay is pretty much identical. They did retain the removal of the Wind God Gao strategy for people that use that, but everything else is still there. You can still get the Paladin Shield, you can still get the Ragnarok Sword or Magicite. Uh, I can't. The only thing I can think of that was made that was significantly changed, and a way that stuck out to me was Humbaba. When you fight the first visit, you fight him. You have to deplete his HP more before he runs away. So that battle went on a little longer. In some cases, things did stick out to me a little bit because the enemy's supposed to have a final attack that they didn't use. The major place that this stuck up for me was just in this part, the Magi Master. He normally casts Ultima when he dies, he didn't. Now I'm not sure if that's because they removed him casting Ultima, or if it's because I had Berserked him and in the Pixel Remaster port, he dies while still under Berserk and thus can't cast magic. I'm not sure which it is. But he didn't cast Ultima when he died, so that makes that boss much easier. And there were a couple other individual enemies here and there where, like, they should have used their final attack, or they should not be doing this, or they should have done this and they didn't. But it's mostly for individual enemies. On the whole, gameplay is unaffected. It plays identical to the original game. Some quality of life features were added for more casual players, and I know some people will not like that, but I understand it. Just a moment. So some quality of life features are unobtrusive and are welcome. The biggest one is you can view everyone's equipment from the menu. You can view your active party's equipment, and you can also cycle through the characters who aren't in your party and adjust their equipment. And that's great. You can keep track of all the playable characters and what they have on them and change their equipment. You don't have, every time you form a new party, you don't have to unequip everyone on the airship and then re-equip the new party in case another character has an accessory or something that you want the current party to use. You can view everyone's equipment and modify it any time, and that is welcome. You espers. If you try to equip an esper that is already equipped on someone else, the game will let you know who it's equipped on and offer to remove it from them so you can equip it to the new character. Excellent! You will never have an esper get stuck on another character. I remember times when I've played and I've put an esper on Shadow as I got to Thamasa, and then I wish, no wait, I shouldn't have done that, I wanted it for Strago. Well, now I can just remove it from Shadow. So minor quality of life improvements like that are much welcome. You can equip characters from the shop menus, and when you go to sell equipment, you can see how much of it you have total and how many of them are currently in use. You can view who can use it, and it just makes navigating the menu and managing everyone's equipment and espers easier. And espers have a star next to them now to let you know you've mastered all the spells they've learned. And you can view everyone's equipped esper in the main menu and how much experience they need to the next level in the main menu. So again, just minor things that just make it easier to micromanage the party. Quality of life improvements to actually make the game easier. Pots of healing were added to various spots in the game. They're not overly done. I noticed they were usually added to places where a player could not leave easily, or they can't leave at all. Examples I remember are the snowfields before the Siege of Nosh, the Leth River, the second save point before the fight with Ultros. Cyan's Dreamscape has two, one at the start of the Dreamscape and one in Dharma Castle, where you appear by the save point. And again, I understand adding pots of healing because those are places a player can get stuck. I've actually lost an entire save file where I was in the Dreamscape and one of my characters was petrified, the other was dead, I had no items to heal either of them, and my third character didn't know remedy or raise. So that is on me on the player. I was not prepared. But it does suck if that happens to you and your entire play file goes down the tubes after hours of work. So I understand adding pots of healing to places where a player can't easily backtrack or where they can't backtrack at all. So it helps avoid soft locks. But again, they're not overly done. Like, it's not like every save point has a pot of healing. No, nowhere close. I'd probably estimate like maybe less than half a dozen throughout the game. There's maybe half a dozen throughout the game of these pots of healing. And again, they're in places where they would be helpful. There, a couple places where I did expect pots of healing or save points added didn't have them. Two examples being the Cultist Tower and the Zozo Tower. I expected they'd put pots of healing atop them because those are very long dungeons and you don't want to have to do them all over again if you lose. But nope. So they're not like holding your hand throughout all of it. There are going to be challenges where you're not going to get free healing out of this. There is a mini map too, and you can view the whole mini map. It does spoil some things, like if you can see a room off by itself. Well, obviously there's some sort of hidden passage there. The mini map doesn't show hidden passages until you actually find them. When you enter a hidden passage, the whole passage appears like in other Pixel remasters. But for the most part, I don't mind that. I know some people are upset by that, but you found the hidden passage, and most of those secret passages that you can't see are fairly short and small and lead to one item anyway. So just showing you which way you have to go, I don't feel like it really detracts from the experience that much, but that's just my opinion. There is the quick save function, so it helps to be able to quick save before fighting a boss, and you can reload if you lose. And there's also autosave when entering a new area as well. But yeah, there's nothing really was done too much to make things really that significantly easier, Just a couple places where a player may get stuck will let you have free healing. And again, it's in places where a player could get stuck and won't have a way out, so if they can't progress, their game is done. So adding a mercy option of a full heal is fine. In my opinion, it's fine. But again, everything that breaks the game is still there. Ultima is still as powerful as ever. Espers are still as not powerful as ever. Sabin is still broken. Edgar is still broken. In my opinion, Mog has been broken with his dances, and he's still great. So again, they haven't really made the games that significantly easier, and they didn't really make it that significantly harder either. Some places, again, it's a little different, but overall it's about the same. So, are there flaws with this Pixel Remaster? Yes. And I feel like there's flaws that come in two varieties. One of them is technical flaws. This game is glitchy as hell. And I've joked on my streams like, well, it's just being true to text. The original Final Fantasy VI was glitchy as hell. This is too. I've had the game hang at various points when trying to use certain attacks. The game just hangs and I have to close it and restart it. Excuse me. So I've had that happen. I've had a problem a couple times. Apparently other people have had this where the game just hangs when the party is frozen. No pun intended, the game is frozen. And you have to turn auto battle on and off and try to run a couple times to unstick it until everyone is unfrozen. So that's annoying. For some reason, Edgar and Sabin don't show up in the Who Can Equip This menu. You go to the screen, show me which characters can equip this item. Edgar and Sabin don't appear in that, which is actually amusing when you select claws, and it says no one can equip this item. I don't know what's up with that. There's things where a character will die in the middle of casting a spell because of sap, or they're landing from a jump and they cast a spell and now they're stuck a step forward, which I believe was in the Super NES version too, so that still happens. There's an item duplication glitch with Gao that people discovered, where if Gao, when he leaps on the Veld, he unequips all his stuff, and then when he rejoins, he'll re-equip it all. But if you take what he had on him and equip it to someone else, when he returns now and the game tries to re-equip him, it'll show in the menu as you having -1 of that item. So if you go and sell that -1 of that item, now you can remove that item from Gao and the other character that had it, and now you have 2 of it. So Gao it's not as exploitable as it sounds, because Gao can't equip the Merit Award, but you can still duplicate relics, and there's plenty you can do with that, so that's game breaking enough. I've heard some people have problems with stutter. I've never had any problems with it stuttering. And my computer's pretty old. It's like my computer's like 6, 7, 8 years old, and it's been upgraded a couple of times. But my computer is not great. Like it struggles to run Blender, you know. And me running OBS and streaming while playing Pixel Remaster, I've never had any problems with it running at all. So I can't speak to other people having stutter problems, but I've never had any problems with that. Uh, but yeah, there are a lot of glitches. Nothing really that like avoid this or like you'll lose your save file or you could lose hours of progress or anything. Nothing like that I found. But yeah, you do want a quick save often just in case something might cause the game to freeze. I didn't have any crashes, I'll say. I did have the game hang, but I never had it crash. So I guess that's one minor plus you can make note of. And the other flaw with this, just a moment. If there's another flaw with Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, it's great. It could have been better, because what really made the original Final Fantasy VI such a great game was that they pushed the Super NES to its limits. It was the first Final Fantasy game where characters had the same overworld sprites as in battle. The sprites were way more animated than anyone else. They had cutscenes that happened in the battle window, which had never happened in previous games. You know, cutscenes in Final Fantasy 4 and 5 that happened in battle were like, we'll play a text line, and a character will be scripted to use an attack, like Tella versus Golbez. That was as close as you could get to an in-battle cutscene in the previous games. You didn't get anything like when Sabin and Cyan meet Gao, or when Kefka mocks the party at the Imperial camp, or Kefka versus General Leo. You didn't get that in previous games. And there's also like characters all animating at the same time, and having such a degree of animation and the music cues. Final Fantasy VI pushed the Super NES to its limits and the engine to its limits really, and was an amazing technical achievement. Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster is not an amazing technical achievement. The thing that everyone, of course, remembers is the opera, and the Pixel Remaster opera is mind-blowing. I've seen people say they don't like Celis's singing. I think it's fine. Like, again, that's me personally. I'm not a singing expert or music expert, so if other people don't like it, that's their opinion. Mine is, I think it sounds fine. But the opera is mind-blowing. It's great. The problem is that it's too good. The opera, if you haven't seen the opera, I won't spoil you for what it does, but the things that they do with the opera from a technical perspective, I would have liked to see them do in other places that called for it. The end of the world, the confrontation with Kefka at the end of the game, the rise of the floating continent. There were so many other places where like they could have done more, and they settled for recreating the original Super NES version, but better. You know, and when they could have done way better. And another so like that's where I think Pixel Remaster falters a bit, is that it could have been way more ambitious. And I understand why it wasn't. The Pixel Remasters have been about trying to recapture the original 6 games and make them look their best selves. So I understand that Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, they were more, especially this game, especially Final Fantasy VI, which has such a special place for so many fans above the other 5 games. Not to diss them, but you know, Final Fantasy VI, it's a lot of people feel very strongly about it. And so I can tell that they were concerned primarily with preserving what people loved about it and just making it better, rather than really breaking the mold and doing anything new. But they could have. And when they did do that with the opera, it was great, and I would have liked to see more of it. Like, characters are not bound by a limited set of animations and colors. So we could have had a whole new range of animations for characters to use in different cutscenes. We could have had more unique sprites for characters that don't have them. Like, me personally, it always bugged me that Katarine has a unique sprite, but Dwayne doesn't. They could have given Dwayne a unique sprite. They could have given each of the 8 dragons a unique sprite that is colored to look like their corresponding dragon. They didn't do that, and the colors don't. They do reuse the dragon sprite, just recolored a few times, and some of them share the colors, and the colors don't match. So, I wish they had changed that. And just things like that, really. They could have done more. Characters could have had more animations. They could have had more unique characters. They could have done more and really, really spruced things up. And they settled just for the original game, but better. And again, I understand that's what they wanted and is what's supposed to be, but I think they could and should have done more. And maybe like there is going to be a fan modding community, so maybe these things will happen with the fan mod community. Like, I know people are already working on sprite replacement mods if they're not already out. I haven't checked. But yeah, that's the second flaw of Pixel Remaster, aside from its glitches. It is not as ambitious as it could have been, and I think it should have been more ambitious. But as it is, just the original Super NES game, but better, it is that. It is the Super NES game, but better, and it is the best it's ever been. The last note is the lack of GBA content. I'm over it. Of course, I do wish Dragon's Den and the new Espers were here. They're not. But I don't feel like Final Fantasy VI is lesser without them. I would like to have them, but if they're not here, they don't ruin the game. And I don't feel, and I'm never gonna recommend to anyone that they should play the Game Boy Advance version over Pixel Remaster, just because the Game Boy Advance has a bonus dungeon and some new Espers. No. This is the best way to play Final Fantasy VI. It's the best looking, it's the best sounding, it's the best playing, and that's something I didn't mention is it's much smoother. And what I mean by that is, like, when the party confronts the frozen Esper after the Siege of Nosh, and there's like a burst of magic or whatever, and everyone is knocked back. And the Super NES version, because everyone's confined to a grid, like Locke's sprite moves back 2 squares and collapses. With Pixel Remaster, that's not a problem. So Locke's sprite and everyone else's sprites can actually go flying back through the air. And it looks cool. And there's little things like that all throughout the game where the sprites just move a bit more freely than they could in the Super NES version. And it just makes things look a little better. Now on the flip side, there are some times where things are a little janky. There's a couple spots where it's like you could see a sprite in place waiting for their cue in the scene, and I don't think we're supposed to see them yet. But you could see them just standing there and not doing anything until the scene tells them, start walking, okay. And there's also a couple points where the game seems to pause, as though it has to load. I noticed this during the opera and during the final confrontation with Kefka, where it seems like this pause was not part of the event. It's the game taking a moment to load the next sequence. So there are a few hiccups like that, but nothing that ruins it. And there's a couple, and there's other very minor nitpicks, like I think they should this happened right away when this scene was loading. We immediately see this character moving and this action happening, when in the original game there was a pause before we saw it. And I would have liked, and I think the scene works better with that pause. Or this character didn't animate the exact same way they did originally. But those are very minor nitpicks. If you haven't played the Super NES version, you're not even going to notice that stuff, really. So, if you've never played Final Fantasy VI, Pixel Remaster is the way to play it. It looks better than ever, it sounds better than ever, it plays better than ever, it runs better than ever. This is the only thing I would say is please bring back the Game Boy Advance dungeons, but I'm not mourning their loss with everything else that's been improved. This is the definitive Final Fantasy VI experience. And on that note, it is one of the best Final Fantasies. The game has aged like a fine wine. The story is still great. The soundtrack is still great and now better than ever. The characters are still memorable and engaging and interesting and likable, and you'll love them. The battle system is still very fun. The world still looks amazing, and just everything that is the final note I can say is everything that was good in the original Final Fantasy VI is just as good in the Pixel Remaster at worst. When Pixel Remaster is at its best, it blows the Super NES version out of the water. When it's at its worst, it's still just as good as the Super NES version. Again, the minor hiccups, aside from it, they could have done more with it, are the technical issues, which I'm sure fan mods or official patches will take care of. So, I've been talking half an hour here in my impromptu review. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. It's the best Final Fantasy VI has ever been, and Final Fantasy VI has always been great, and this is the greatest way to experience it. If you've played Final Fantasy VI before and weren't sure about getting Pixel Remaster, get it, you'll probably love it. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VI before, get the Pixel Remaster. It's better than ever. If you didn't like Final Fantasy VI before, get the heck off my channel. What are you doing here? No, but yeah, just Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster is a great experience. I highly enjoyed it. I'll probably replay it in the future, and the only thing the only other problem with it is that it's made me want a full Final Fantasy VI remake even more than I already did, because this was just such a fantastic experience. So thank you for watching this review. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Pixel Remaster below. If you feel I missed anything or have any specific questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. I love talking about Final Fantasy VI. And until then, I'll see you around the channel where I upload more Final Fantasy VI content. Thanks for watching.